In the face of the second Trump administration, people are scrambling to defend the people and places we love and finding the courage to act even when we're afraid.
Despite our fears, we have to remember that organized people have defeated authoritarians before.
Organized people have tremendous power, but we have to use the strategies for building power that we know work.
In Minnesota, even in the midst of Trump's first term, we defied the odds. We used the anti-Trump momentum in our state to build lasting efforts.
Our work was so impactful that you might have heard about it. Some folks call it the Minnesota Miracle. In 2023, in just a few months, Minnesota Democrats passed the most ambitious legislative agenda since the New Deal, an agenda that created real change in the lives of all Minnesotans. Changes that help protect Minnesota from the rightward shift felt across the country in 2024. As a reminder, there were 17 Democratic trifectas across the country, some of them blue states for years. So then how are we in just one session able to pass more progressive legislation than all of them? Every win in Minnesota was powered by one thing: people. Working together, building collective power for over a decade. In the face of the first Trump administration, Minnesotans didn't just complain, doom scroll, or cower. We organized. Rather than reacting to every terrible policy that came down, some of us focused on building long-term power and then learning how to wield it to win big, meaningful changes in our state.
Programs like universal school lunches,
Codified abortion rights,
Paid family and medical leave,
100% clean energy by 2040,
free college for families making less than $80,000 a year,
massive investments in housing, transportation, childcare, education, and healthcare.
a down payment to replace every lead pipe in Minnesota.
and so much more. I suggest you pause this video. You need to read this list.
We have some great elected leaders in Minnesota, but change didn't happen just because of them or at the whim of a wealthy few. No, it took 10 years of sophisticated inside and outside organizing by a whole ecosystem of labor, faith, and grassroots community organizations, working together, each playing their role. Turns out the Minnesota Miracle wasn't a miracle at all. There was no silver bullet or magic leader who came to save us. It was about organizing. There is no real substitute for good organizing.
At its core, organizing is moving people from seeing themselves as merely victims or bystanders to taking on a public role, stepping into their power, and then going on to move other people to do the same thing. In the electoral world, there is an obsession with how many voters you talk to and how cheaply you do it. Some people call that organizing, but it is not. That is mobilization. In Minnesota, we set out to build a majoritarian movement, a movement that welcomes everyone, not just people who already agreed with us. We met people where they were at, in workplaces, barbershops, churches, mosques, and synagogues. We had thousands of real conversations in schools, in childcare centers, and workplaces to build the agenda that the people there wanted to create. Our organizers built relationships that weren't transactional, that could weather any storm. And organizations like Faith in Minnesota and Unidos Minnesota built bases that are powerful enough not just to win one campaign, but to be permanent political homes for their members, places where people know they belong. Labor was a key partner. Neither labor nor grassroots organizations could have moved their agenda alone. Workers fought for all Minnesotans, and we stood in solidarity with labor when they needed us. These relationships created an ecosystem of people and organizations united around shared values. A core group of funders, including Movement Voter Project, were critical to the success of the Minnesota Miracle. These funders were willing to fund whole ecosystems of organizing over many years so that groups could experiment and build with one another and feel less pressure to compete. Support from MVP allowed us to contest races that people usually ignore, not just to stand up against Republicans, but to change the face of the Democratic Party in Minnesota too. We got thousands of people, many of whom had never even voted, to participate in precinct caucuses. Our people committed to each other, not to any politician. We worked as organized blocks of delegates, and they became the deciding votes in Democratic Party nominating contests. Candidates for office then understood that their political future depended on our people. Our mantra was, we need you to govern with an agenda that is as bold as the crisis in people's lives. Across Minnesota, we elected a whole new generation of leaders, people of color, Indigenous people, women, young people, and queer people to seats up and down the ballot.
But we also learned diverse representation isn't enough. If you're building your demand around representation, it's like you're asking for a favor. The response from those in power is almost always pity, or one seat at the table. When your demand is based on the power you have built on the ground, everything changes. Creating the change we wanted wasn't just about building trust and accountability. It was about learning to govern, being clear about power, and learning how to wield it. A lot of the people we elected were organizers themselves. Some of them were members of our own organizations. This mattered because they organized on the inside. Together, we created spaces like the Minnesota Values Project, where legislators, labor, and grassroots organizations work to articulate shared values and then hash out a shared agenda. Elected leaders partnered with us because we had real power on the ground.
In 2020, my organization, Faith in Minnesota, ran the largest volunteer voter engagement program in the state. Democrats took the House, the GOP kept the Senate. But we didn't go away after the election. Hundreds of our people stayed engaged with their legislators on our agenda. Hundreds of others kept working to flip their districts. And in 2022, with the support from Movement Voter Project again, we formed a PAC. We built our own program and then coordinated directly with the party in 10 Senate districts. We showed up with large numbers of volunteers and became the field program for many of those candidates. Those candidates then directly experienced our people, who were also their constituents, getting them elected. Over time, the leaders we helped elect moved into positions of real power. Majority Leader of the House, the Majority Leader of the Senate, the Chair of the Tax Committee, the Chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And they'd been on a journey with us over multiple election cycles, in real relationships, all of us preparing to act boldly together as soon as we got the chance. Our tactics improved too. We needed a narrative strategy embedded in our organizing that moved people to see what is possible. We needed messages that could push back against our opponents, stoking fear and division, and we needed messages to get us out of our own cynicism. We had to shift how we thought and talked about what we could achieve together, to organize a chorus of people singing from the same songbook. We needed to build narrative power.
One of our most powerful tools is called the race-class narrative. Race-class narrative combats appeals to authoritarianism by talking about race and class together, and by reminding people that some politicians use white supremacist and anti-immigrant appeals in order to divide us, while the wealthy few are picking our pockets. Sound familiar? We learned how to put this narrative to work in our conversations with voters. We reminded people that we are united by the values we share and the vision for the future that the majority of us want. But there are villains holding us back. If we won't name those villains, whether they're corporations, billionaires, or fossil fuel companies, our messages don't land. Our clarity and courage rubbed off on politicians running for office. Many of them echoed our narrative and won. Despite many predictions, in 2022, Minnesota voters elected a Democratic trifecta for the first time since 2012: the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. Because of our years in power building, agenda shaping, and deep organizing, we showed up on the first day of the 2023 legislative session knowing what we were fighting for and ready to act. Our bases showed up with us, and we won. Now, this is not a fairy tale. The path to progress in Minnesota wasn't linear. We spent years in divided government, but we used those years to build our power, grow our base, and elect legislators ready to govern with an agenda as bold as the crises in people's lives. Some of our organizations didn't last. Some coalitions fizzled out. Some campaigns failed and left organizers feeling exhausted and defeated. We lost plenty of elections, but we learned that how we pivot after a big loss determines our future. When we fail at the ballot, we can blame the voters or we can rethink our strategy, our messaging, and our commitment to organizing new people. Today, as we sit with the gravity of our national losses in 2024, we're at another major pivot point, perhaps the most daunting yet. This moment demands we rethink our strategies, dig deeper, and organize a whole lot more people.
The qualities that made the Minnesota Miracle possible are the ones we need right now. We need to stay focused on power. We need bases that are resilient, relationships that are strong, political homes that create real belonging, and allow people to wield power over years, not months. We need organizing that moves new people to step into their power. We can use the strategies deployed in Minnesota. We can advance a majoritarian agenda across the country, even now in the face of a second Trump administration. But it's going to take time, it's going to take work, and it's going to take long-term investment. There are no shortcuts. With our federal government in chaos, states are now the front line in our fight for multiracial democracy. States are our building blocks towards federal power. We accomplished incredible things in Minnesota, but Minnesota is not a unicorn. With investments similar to what we saw in Minnesota, states across the country could see victories like these within the next 10 years. Long-term power, built from the ground up and top down, is not a pipe dream. It's our only path forward.
So that's that. Will we give up or will we stand up? Will we organize or will we allow our country and our futures to be stolen by the billionaire broligarchy? I know what I'm going to do, and I hope you'll join me.
The Minnesota Miracle can't just stay in Minnesota. We need to support incredible organizers all across the country to transform their states and the nation. Join us at movement.vote.